In this episode, we are going to be finishing our inventory system. We will add the ability to view notes from our inventory by placing them back into the player's hand, and we will also add the ability to equip items such as keys that can be used to unlock doors. And welcome back to the channel, everyone. So in the previous episode, we worked on our consumable items here. So we can right-click, use them. We can also double-click, use them. We can right-click and drop them, and they will end up on the ground. Or we can drag and drop them, and they'll end up on the ground. As a reminder, these green and red lines are part of an add-on called Debug Draw 3D. They are not necessary to implement for your controller for that to be working. I think I like being able to show this to explain kind of the more complicated vector math that's going on. But what we want to focus on today are the notes here, because right now we can pick up a note in our hand, put it in our inventory. We can't actually put it back in our hand. What we have to do is we have to re-drop it and pick it back up to read it, which is not what we want to do. And we also want to work on trying to equip this key so that way it appears in our right hand the way the note does on our left. So let's go ahead and talk about it. All right, so going back into our inventory controller script, you'll remember our function for dropping collectibles, our function for using the collectibles. Now we are going to write a function to view our collectibles, or in this case, our inspectables. So we're going to go ahead and create a function. We are going to call this view inspectable. This is also going to take in a underscore slot ID, which will be an integer, and it will return void. So just like always, we're going to go ahead and get our slot and our slot data. As a reminder, what we are doing is we are going and finding the specific inventory slot that we are clicking on in our inventory and ensuring that there is actually an item there that we want to interact with. And so similar to the drop, if we come in here and I pick up this item, you'll see that the item doesn't exist anymore. And it exists in our inventory. And if we want it back in the world, we have to drop it back into the world because that will reinstantiate the object into the world. So if we come back up here, we are going to essentially take this same exact code here. In fact, we don't want the second line, we just want the first one. So we're going to grab this line here because we are going to be creating a new instance of the item model prefab from our inventory slot. So now that our note exists, we need to put it back in our player's hand. Now, lucky for us, that's actually very easy to do. If we come back up to our top and click on my player scene here, you'll notice that our interaction controller sits right next to our inventory controller. And so similar to the other objects, we can go ahead and just get a reference to our interaction controller. So our interaction controller sits on the same level as the inventory controller. So we can just go ahead and drag that in as well. So we're going to just right after the instance is created. So once we instantiate it, it exists somewhere in the world. All we need to do is called interaction controller dot on note inspected, and we just need to send it this instance. And after that, the instance now exists in the world and it should no longer be in our inventory. So we're going to copy this line and we're going to say slot.fill slot with null. So the reason this works is if we go to where we are dropping it, we are doing the same thing where we were creating the instance, and then we had to make it a child of some node in the scene tree so that way it existed before calculating where we put it. The fortunate thing about the note is all of that logic already exists in the on note inspected. So if we go to the interaction controller and we find where we wrote our on note inspected, you'll see right here that if we don't have a parent, we have the logic here to ensure that the mesh layer and the collision is set. Then we are adding it as a child of the note hand and positioning all of its transform, position, and rotation. So essentially the on note inspected can be called whether the note is in the world or whether the note is in the inventory. So we should be able to test this out. Although what we need to do is we need to go to our inventory controller and we need to link up the view inspectable back up in our code. So back up in our on context menu selected, we want to replace our print statement with view inspectable of our slot ID, like so. And then we also need to replace it in our double click. So where you see print view thing, call view inspectable with the slot ID. Now we should be able to test. All right, so let's see if we have any bugs. I can walk up to this note I can select it, and that note now enters my inventory. I should be able to drop the note and pick it back up, of course. But what we are interested in is viewing the note. So if I view the note has now left my inventory, and I can view it. And then if I left click, I should be able to put it away in the inventory. Let's make sure that works with both our notes. And it does. Awesome. So now our notes are just about done, I believe, because we can do everything we need to with them. All right, so if we scroll down here, we now are able to use and drop objects. We can view notes and drop notes. Now what we want to do is we want to be able to equip objects. Now, unfortunately, we don't have that logic in our interaction controller yet, but it's actually very similar to the note. So let's go ahead and write that and we'll talk about it. So right here, after our func on note inspected, I'm going to create a function that I'm going to call on item equipped. And this is going to be very similar to the note. So we're going to have an item, which is going to be a node 3D. And this is also going to return void. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take this branch right here of all this note logic here. I'm just going to go ahead and grab that, and I'm going to paste it right here. And we're just going to replace anything that says note with the item. And the reason we're doing that is because when we pick up the key, it will enter our inventory. And then when we equip it, I want the key to sit on the player's right hand the way that the note sits on the player's left hand right now. So that requires us to view it on its own mesh layer so it does not clip through walls. And we want to remove the collision so that way it doesn't push the player around at all. Now, the next thing we're going to do is copy the next block from the note hand here. And of course, instead of this being the note hand, we're going to need to create an item hand. So let's go ahead and go into 3D and find where our player is. So you'll see our player here. And if I click on my note hand, you'll see that the note hand sits on the bottom left-hand side of the player camera. I'm behind the player right now, by the way. I want to create this exact same thing on the player's right-hand side. So I'm going to grab the note hand and copy paste it on the note camera here. And so you'll see that my note hand is at minus 0.75x. I want my note hand, which I'm going to rename to item hand. I'm going to take this item hand and I'm going to set this at positive 0.75. So you'll see now that we have our note hand on the left. Let me make sure I got my left and right set up correctly. My note hand on my left and my item hand on the right. Now, if we go back into the script, we're going to need a reference to our item hand. So up here in our on readies, I'm going to left click drag and then press control. So that way we have a reference to our item hand. And then we'll go ahead and come down to our on item equipped function. And we'll change that note hand to a note item hand dot add child, and that child is now the item. And now once again, we just need to replace anything with note to be item, and anything with item hand to be, or with anything with note hand to be item hand. Now I am going to change the vector 3 degrees here. So instead of what it is for the note, because the note needs to be facing up towards the player, I want the key to be facing out towards the door. So we're going to change this to 0, 180, and minus 90. So now here is where some new code is going to be written. So if we go back up to the top, we're going to need a new variable, which is going to be item underscore equipped. This is a Boolean, and by default, we won't have any items equipped. The next thing we're going to need is we are going to need a reference to our equipped item, which is going to be a node 3D of some kind. And then I'm also going to cache the interaction component for the equipped item. And that way we can get access to its item data and its action data much easier. So with that done, we're now going to come back down to our function here. So we have just equipped an item. So now that we know that all of our setup is good, we are going to say item equipped equals true. We are going to cache our equipped item. So we're going to say our equipped item equals this item. We are going to cache the interaction component. So we are going to say our equipped item interaction component is equal to find interaction component of our equipped item. Once again, find interaction component already exists in this class. And I think that's everything we need for now. So we're going to go ahead and equip it and see what goes wrong. So back into our interaction controller, or back into our inventory controller, we are going to create our function, which is going to be equip collectible. This, of course, is going to match all of the other functions we've written so far. So we're going to have our, our slot ID as an argument. We are going to need to verify our slot data and cache the slot that we are using. We are going to instantiate the model prefab very similarly. And then this time, instead of calling our onNoteInspected, we are going to copy and paste these two lines and say dot on item equipped. And we'll send the same instance, and then we will fill our inventory with a null. So let's go ahead and test and see what happens. So if I run the game, I'll come over to my key. I'll pick up my key. Oh, and we forgot to link it up. That's always a good mistake to keep in these videos. We need to go back to our inventory controller, and we need to fill out the last little leftovers here. So if we scroll back up, you'll see that we still need to do equip collectible with our slot ID. Copy that, and we need to put it up here where we are doing our double click as well. So now let's go ahead and try to test this. Let's run over to our key. We'll click on our key and we'll double click it. And you'll see that it comes in my right hand. But if you look, it's not following my hand the same way that the notes do. Yeah, that's weird. I'm going to give you a second to think why that might be and how we are going to fix it. So down here in my file system, if I open up the note here, and then I'm going to go ahead and open up the key, the only noticeable difference between these two are the types of the root node. So this run note is a static body 3D, while this key is a physics body 3D. And we want the key to be a physics body 3D because I want to be able to have it interact with the world like this. So it'll fall off of things, I can drop it, and it'll clink on the ground, things like that. Problem with this is that physics bodies will almost always have physics calculations being acted upon them, right? Which is what you want. You want the key to fall down to the ground. However, in this sense, I don't want any physics happening to my key because I want the key to be staying in my right hand the entire time. So we are going to have to do a little fixing of that. So back here in this on item equipped, you may have noticed I have a very precariously placed space here. And what we're going to do here is we are essentially going to freeze that object in time. So that way it's not falling, rotating, spinning, or having any otherwise random physics actions acted upon it. And not every item is necessarily going to be a rigid body. I can think of a few cases in my game. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to say if our item is a rigid body 3D, and we kind of brought this up, maybe it was the last episode or two ago, I can't quite remember, about freezing items. In this case, we do want to freeze this item. So freezing essentially blocks any gravitational and other forces from being acted on it. So we're going to freeze the item. We are going to set its linear velocity equal to vector3.0. We're going to do the same exact thing for its angular velocity. Its angular velocity is 0. And then we are also going to remove gravity from it. So we're going to say item.gravityscale equal to 0.0. So now let's go ahead and test. If I run the game, I come over here and I grab my key and I equip it. You'll see now that it follows me as I run around. One thing I do want to do really quickly, if you followed along with my note tutorial, you'll see that as we kind of move around, the note will tilt and sway with the player here, which I found very immersive. We don't currently have that for the key. If I go ahead and rerun the game here and I grab the key here, you'll see that the key will be affected by the field of view chains, but it won't be affected by the player moving. And that's actually a very simple fix. If I go into my player script here, and I'll come up to the top, all I need is a reference to the item hand in the same way that we have a reference to the note hand. So I'll go ahead and drag that in here. And I'll just bring that down here. And I also already have a built-in function for tilt and sway. And so we're just going to go ahead and copy that. And we'll just check if our item hand is not null. We will add all of the respective rotations. And note sway amount can stay the same. So now if I go ahead and run the game and I grab this guy and I equip him, you'll see that the key just has a little bit of a tilt and sway to him, which I think makes the game feel a little bit more professional. So that's pretty cool. So in terms of an inventory, that's really all we need to do. If I grab all of these objects and then I grab these objects and then I grab a note, I can swap all of the objects here. I can drop them out into the world like this. I can equip objects, things like that, and I can eat out of my inventory. But for the sake of the tutorial, I am going to implement kind of using this object because I implemented using the other object. So I will do a solid there. All right, so back in your interaction controller, you may have noticed that we created this item equipped boolean and never used it. Well, now we're going to use it. So let's go ahead and scroll up to find where our input function is. So right now, if our note overlay is displayed and we press the button, we will put the note in our inventory. We're going to do something similar, except we're going to say if we have an item equipped and our input.is action just pressed, and if that action is our primary action, so if we have a key in our hand and we press the left mouse button, we want to try to use the item, maybe on a door, maybe on a chest, something like that. So we're going to call a method that we are going to create right now called use equipped item. So go ahead and copy that. We're going to go down to so we have on item equipped. We'll create func use equipped item, and this will be void. So this use case is going to be specific to my controller because we are going to be using the potential objects here. So you'll notice if you have not been following along with the original tutorial, if you hover over the door, the reticle changes, and that's symbolic of the fact that this door can be interacted with. You know, this box can be interacted with, this lever can be interacted with, etc. And so when we hover over something we can potentially interact with, we cache a potential object. If I go ahead and come back up here really quickly, you'll see that we have a raycast, and that will hit something called a potential object. If that potential object has an interaction component, that is essentially going to become our current object. So in our mind, what we want to know is, 1, do we have an equipped item? In this case, we do. And 2, are we hovering over something that this item could interact with? In this case, a door might be locked and I might have to click the key to unlock it. So in that case, that's what we are worried about. Our input function has handled that first part. It checks if our item is equipped and we left clicked. So if we come back down to our method, we are essentially going to check if we have our last potential object, which if I come back up here, you'll see that our last potential object is an object that we could potentially interact with because it has an interaction component on it. So let's go ahead and come back down here. So in this case, we'll assume that we have found a door. And for now, we're just going to return and we're going to deal with the negative first. So in the negative, we are worried with what happens if we have the key in our inventory, we have left clicked, but whatever we clicked on, the key can't interact with ever. Whether that's a door, whether that's just the air, doesn't matter. We can't use it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to print nothing interesting happens, ... Little RuneScape reference there, if you will. And if that's the case, I don't want to leave this key equipped. My personal view is that I want the key to go back into the inventory. So what we are going to do is we are going to call inventory controller dot pickup item, and we are just going to send it our equipped item interaction component dot item data. After that, we are going to take our equipped item and we are going to queue free it to get rid of it. We are going to say that our equipped item is null. So now the equipped item doesn't exist, and we are just going to say that the item equipped is false. That's no longer true. So most games, like you could, put the gun away or put the key away or something. In my mind, I think it's a one or done. You pull the key out, and then if this is the green key for the green door, you try to click on it, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But it should go back into my inventory like this. As you can see, that does work. So now we just need to create the alternative where what if this is something the key can be used on. So if we have a potential object, let's go ahead and come back up here. Potential object means that it has an interaction component, which means that it has some kind of way of interacting with the object in front of it. Let me come back up to the actual method here, which means what we can do is we can call a method on this interaction. So we'll say if interaction underscore component has method, and we'll say just use item, and we'll write that for the door in a second. So if this interaction component has a use item, then what we will do is just call that. So we'll say if the interaction component dot use item, and what item is it using? We are going to send it the equipped items item data like this. And so this function use item will return either true or false. True if the item is successfully used, or false if the item was not successfully used. So if the item was not successfully used, I'm just going to steal this and just say nothing interesting happens. In reality, good game design would be saying like, this is not the right key for the door. I hate my players, so they just have to deal with this, I guess. So if the item was successfully used, I believe I added this in. So if I look at my equipable action, yes, I have this Boolean one-time use. And my example use case for that was a key should theoretically, let me just write return here. A key should theoretically be a one-time use. The green key works on the green door. However, maybe you have multiple doors that are bolted shut and early in the game, you can't open them. But once you acquire the bolt cutters in level 5, you can go back through levels 1 through 4 and open up doors you couldn't before. In that case, the bolt cutters are not one-time use, whereas the key is. So if we have used the item, we do want to know if it is a one-time use. So we are going to check the equipped items item data. We are going to check its action data. And we're going to see if it is a one-time use. If the item is a one-time use, we are going to do the same thing we do down here. We are going to queue free the item, and we are going to say that item equipped equal to false because we are no longer equipping an item. And then we want to make sure that we return so that way we don't add that item back into our inventory. However, if the item is not a one-time use, so it is bolt cutters, what will happen is it'll put the item back in the inventory after you use it and then remove it from being equipped, but it'll still be in your inventory to use again. And one thing I'm noticing is that this if statement here does not have an else. So once again, we are just going to kind of copy this all down. So if this specific interactable, maybe this is a box, you can't unlock the box, nothing interesting happens, will work for that as well. So let's go ahead and modify our door code so that way we can unlock it. If you've been following along with the tutorial series, you'll know that I already have doors that lock and they can be unlocked. So as a demonstration, if I go into my sandbox and I go to this door here, I can set is locked equal to true. And so if I come over to this door, I can't open it, but if I type in this keypad, I can now open the door. So we're going to create that use item method that we're going to be searching for. So we're going to say func use item. And this item is going to have its item data, and that's how we're going to decide if we can use it. And this is going to return a bool. Remember, this returns true if we can use the object, false otherwise. And so for the sake of the door, we're going to create a new export variable. So up here at the top, I've just created an export variable, unlock key name. And so this is just going to take a specific name for a specific key to unlock the door. So down here in the use item, we're just going to check if item data dot item name is equal to the unlock key name, something like that. And so if this is the correct key, these will match. So we want to say is locked equals false and return true to say that using the item worked. If they don't match, then it's not the right key and we want to return false. So now if I go into the sandbox here, we're going to grab this door and just make it local to make everything nice and easy. So this door is going to be locked, and I'm going to say that the unlock key name is purple key. Now, I'm not going to change the color of the keys for the sake of the demonstration, but we're going to pretend that they are, specific colors. Okay, so to go ahead and test this out, we're going to look at our door here. So now the door is set up to where it needs the purple key to be unlocked. So if we look at our first key here, our first key is the green key, and our second key is the purple key. So if I go ahead and run the game, and I come over here, this first key should be the green key. So if I equip this and try to unlock the door, nothing interesting happens, and I can't unlock the door. Now, if I select this key, equip this key, and try to unlock the door, you'll see that it now unlocks and the door can be opened as you see. So that is how you would do equipable objects with our inventory system. So if I go ahead and rerun the game, I'll grab a few notes, grab this guy, grab a few of these guys. We can now swap everything between us. We can drop all these items into the world. We can review notes. We can use these items. And of course, as you just saw, we can use the keys. And that brings us to the end of the inventory system tutorial series. Now, obviously, there are still more things to do with this inventory, but I hope you guys have learned enough and understand the code base enough to make some of these changes on your own. Now, some of the additions I made, as you can see here, I do have a full inventory system, is I added an additional check to ensure that you can't pick up items if your inventory is full. So for instance, you can see I can't pick up this note here, but if I consume this object, I can now pick that note up. I've also added some additional sound effects, so I'll probably have to boost that in post, but there is a sound effect when switching items around your inventory. I've also added some additional text and noises for unlocking doors. So if I take this key and click on this door, you'll see that nothing interesting happens because that's the wrong key. But if I grab the right key from my inventory, you'll hear a little unlock sound as well. So let's go ahead and do that again. And just a little bit of improvement. So all of these changes are live on my GitHub page. There's a link in the description below. These changes are 110% completely free. Download the project, review all the code changes, and compare them against what you have right now, and you can probably learn a little bit from it as well. And if you have any problems or bugs in the future, feel free to join the Discord and post in the help channel. I can absolutely help you through any problems. And if there are any bugs, I won't be making any follow-up videos. Rather, I will just be updating the GitHub page itself. With that being said, I will see you all in the next one.